During a family dinner, my sister-in-law suddenly stood up, pointed at me, and shouted, "You're a liar, Daniel." Then she turned to my 10-year-old daughter, and said, "You're not really part of this family. He's not your real dad." My daughter froze, shaking, completely traumatized. But what I did next made everyone regret ever opening their mouth. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late October air carried the smell of wood smoke and dying leaves as Daniel Harlow pulled his truck into the gravel driveway of the Caton house. Through the windshield, he could see warm light spilling from the windows, golden and inviting in a way that made his stomach tighten. Beside him, Lena sat rigid in the passenger seat, her small fingers working that blue hair tie around and around her wrist. Twist, release, twist, release. She'd been doing that since they left home. "We don't have to go in," Daniel said quietly, killing the engine, but leaving his hand on the key. "We could turn around right now. Get burgers. Go home." Lena shook her head, still staring at the house. At 10 years old, she looked so much like Mara sometimes hurt to breathe. Same dark hair, same serious eyes that seemed to carry more weight than a child should ever have to hold. "It's been 2 years, Dad," she whispered. Aunt Nora said. She said, "It's time we came back. That family should be together." Daniel's jaw clenched. Family. The word tasted like rust in his mouth. He wanted to tell Lena that blood didn't make family. That some people wore the title like armor while wielding like a weapon. But she was 10. She'd already lost her mother. She didn't need her father's bitterness poisoning what little family they had left. "Okay," he said, opening his door. The October wind hit his face cold and sharp. "But if anything feels wrong, we leave. No arguments. Deal. Deal." Lena climbed out, clutching a small drawing she'd made in art class. A house with flowers and stick figures holding hands. She'd worked on it all week, wanting to give something to her cousin Ruby. The front door opened before they reached it. Bryce Keaton stood in the doorway, 44 years old and already looking like he'd aged a decade since Daniel last saw him. His smile was too wide, too practiced. "Daniel, Lena, come in. Come in. Nora is just finishing up the ham." He stepped aside, ushering them into a living room that smelled of lavender cleaner and something cooking. Rosemary, maybe. The house was spotless, almost aggressively clean, like Nora had spent days scrubbing away any trace of life. "Smells good," Daniel offered. "Because that's what you said. That's how you played this game." "Nora's outdone herself," Bryce said, closing the door. "Ruby, come say hello." Footsteps on the stairs. And then Ruby appeared, 13 now, taller than Daniel remembered with her mother's angular face, but her father's softer eyes. She gave a small wave. "Hi, Uncle Daniel." "Hi, Lena." "Hi." Lena held out her drawing shyly. "I made this for you." Ruby took it carefully, studying the colorful stick figures in the house with flowers. For a moment, something genuine crossed her face. Surprise, maybe pleasure, before she caught herself and glanced toward the kitchen doorway. "Thanks," she said quietly. "It's really good," Ruby set the table. Nora's voice called from the kitchen, sharp and clear. Not a request, Ruby disappeared toward the dining room without another word. Still holding the drawing, Daniel felt Lena's hand slip into his, her palm damp with nervous sweat. He squeezed gently. 2 hours. He told himself they could survive 2 hours. The dining room table was set with Nora's good china, the kind that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly salary from the carpentry shop where he used to teach. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light. Everything was perfect, arranged with the kind of precision that felt more like control than care. Nora emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of ham. Her blonde hair pulled back tight enough to stretch her face. She was 41, but fought aging like a war with expensive creams and twice-weekly gym sessions she never let anyone forget about. When she saw Daniel, her smile went cold at the edges. "Daniel," she said, setting the platter down with deliberate care. "And little Lena, not our Lena, not sweet Lena, just little Lena," said with the same tone you'd use for a stray cat. "Nora," Daniel kept his voice neutral, pulling out a chair for Lena. "Thanks for having us." "Well," Nora smoothed her apron, still not quite looking at him. "It's been too long. Families should be together, especially after everything. Everything like Mara's death was an inconvenience. A scheduling conflict that had kept them apart." They sat. Bryce carved the ham with nervous efficiency while Nora brought out sides. Roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, her famous dinner rolls that weren't actually famous, but she insisted on calling them that. Ruby sat across from Lena, occasionally sneaking glances at the drawing she'd propped against a water glass. The conversation stayed surface level. Weather, Ruby's school, Bryce's work at the insurance company. Daniel answered when spoken to, watched Lena pick at her food, and counted minutes. Then came dessert. Nora disappeared into the kitchen, and returned with a pecan pie, golden and perfect. She began slicing, serving pieces with the kind of exaggerated care that made Daniel's shoulders tense. Something was building. He could feel it in the air like static before lightning. Lena reached for her plate and that's when it happened. Nora's hand slammed on the table. Crystal rattled. Bryce's fork clattered to his plate. "No," Nora said, her voice low and trembling. Everyone froze. Nora stood slowly, her chair scraping back with a sound like a scream. Her face had gone red, blotchy with something that looked like rage, but felt like poison. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice rising. "I can't sit here and pretend. I can't watch you play house with that child like none of us know the truth." Daniel's blood went cold. "Nora, don't." She jabbed a finger across the table at him, shaking. "You're a liar, Daniel Harlow. A liar. And everyone in this room knows it except her." She turned that finger toward Lena, who had gone completely still, her small hands frozen on her napkin. "She's not part of this family." Nora's voice filled every corner of the dining room. "You're not her real father. You never were, and I'm done pretending otherwise." The silence that followed was so complete, Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Across the table, Lena's face had drained of color. Her mouth opened slightly, no sound coming out. "Mom." Ruby started, her voice cracking. "Not now, Ruby." Daniel stood. He didn't remember deciding to stand. His body just moved, driven by something deeper than thought. His hands found the edge of the table, gripping hard enough that his knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice came out quiet. So quiet it terrified him more than shouting ever could. "Bryce, take Ruby upstairs now." Bryce didn't move, frozen with his mouth half open. Now Bryce jerked in emotion, grabbing Ruby's arm. She resisted for a second, then let herself be pulled away. Their footsteps on the stairs sounded like retreating soldiers. Daniel moved around the table slowly, each step measured. Nora stood her ground, chin high, but he saw the flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe fear. Good. He stopped 3 feet away from her. Close enough that she couldn't look anywhere but at his face. "You want to say that again?" he asked softly. "To me, not to a child." "To me," Nora's jaw worked. "It's the truth. Everyone knows Mara was with someone else before." "Her cousin," Daniel said. The words came out like glass. Her cousin who gave her a place to stay when her parents kicked her out. The same cousin whose wedding we all attended. The one you'd know about if you'd ever bothered to ask instead of building fantasies in your head. A muscle in Nora's cheek twitched. Daniel took one step closer. You just looked my daughter in the eye and told her she wasn't mine. You did that to a 10-year-old child who lost her mother 2 years ago. You did that because you're bitter and jealous and so desperate for attention that you'd hurt a child to get it. I'm not finished. His voice never rose above a whisper, but it cut through her protest like a blade. You have spent years trying to poison everything good in my life. You try to turn Mara's parents against me. You spread rumors. You couldn't stand that your sister was happy when you're so goddamn miserable. Nora's mouth snapped shut, eyes widening. But this Daniel's voice fractured slightly just for a moment. Going after my daughter after everything she's already lost. He leaned in close enough that she took an involuntary step back. You will regret ever speaking to her that way, he said quietly. I promise you that. Then he turned and walked to where Lena still sat frozen at the table, her small body trembling. He crouched beside her chair, his large hands gentle on her shoulders. Come on, sweetheart, he murmured. We're going home. Lena nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. She stood on shaky legs, letting Daniel guide her toward the door. Behind them, Nora made a sound. Protest or defense or regret. Daniel didn't know and didn't care. He didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye to Bryce, who'd appeared at the top of the stairs wearing the face of a man watching his world crack apart. Daniel just kept his hand on Lena's shoulder and walked them both out into the October night. The truck started on the first try. Daniel pulled out of the driveway slowly, carefully, because his hands were shaking and Lena was crying harder now. Great hiccuping sobs that broke what was left of his heart into smaller pieces. He drove toward the lake, not home yet. He couldn't face their empty house with Lena. This upset, the road wound through pine trees, their branches black against the darkening sky, his headlights carved tunnels through the growing dark. In the rear-view mirror, Lena curled against the door, her face pressed to the window. Her breath fogged the glass. Lena, breathe, he said gently. Just breathe, sweetheart. She sucked in air between sobs, trying to obey. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his hands ached. Mara used to sit in the passenger seat. She'd reach over and rest her hand on his thigh when they drove at night. Her presence a quiet comfort. Now that seat stayed empty, and the space where she should be felt like a wound that never healed. The memory ambushed him. Mara in the hospital hours after Lena was born, exhausted but radiant, holding their daughter with tears streaming down her face. She's ours, Mara had whispered. Daniel, she's really ours. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, forces focused back to the road. Behind him, Lena's voice came out small and broken. Dad, yeah, baby. Am I yours? The truck swerved slightly. Daniel caught it, heart hammering, and pulled onto the shoulder. He threw the gear in a park and turned around completely, reaching back to rest, both hands on her shoulders. Look at me, he said. She did, her face red and streaked with tears, her nose running. She looked so small, so breakable. You are my daughter, Daniel said, each word deliberate and clear. You are mine. I held you the day you were born. I walked you at 3 o'clock in the morning when you had colic. I taught you to ride a bike and read stories and make pancakes. Nothing anyone says changes that. Nothing. But Aunt Nora said Aunt Nora is wrong and cruel. And she said what she said because she wanted to hurt us both. He squeezed her shoulders gently. People like her, they throw poison because they're drowning in it themselves. But that doesn't make the poison true. Lena's lip trembled. I don't understand why she hates me. She doesn't hate you, sweetheart. She hates herself. She hates that your mom was happy. She hates that I love you more than anything in this world. His voice cracked, but her hate doesn't change facts. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter. Lena threw herself forward as much as the seatbelt would allow, and Daniel reached back to hold her as best he could in the awkward space between seats. She cried into his shoulder and he let her, making the soft sound Mara used to make. I've got you sick. They stayed there until the crying slowed to hiccups, until Lena's breathing steadied and her body stopped shaking. Only then did Daniel sit back and put the truck in gear. Let's go home, he said quietly. The house was dark when they arrived. Daniel left most of the lights off, just flicking on the lamp in the living room that cast warm shadows across the worn furniture. This house had been Mara's dream. A small craftsman with good bones and a view of the lake. They'd spent 5 years fixing it up together, room by room, argument by argument, kiss by kiss. Now it felt too big and too quiet. Lena went straight to her room without being asked. Daniel heard her door close softly. Not a slam, just a gentle click that somehow felt worse. He stood in the living room, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands, his body, himself. The rage that had carried him through the confrontation was draining away, leaving something raw behind. He walked to the kitchen and stood under the buzzing fluorescent light that he kept meaning to replace. The kitchen table sat empty for chairs arranged around it. They only ever used 2 now. On the wall, Mara smiled at him from a framed photograph. She held newborn Lena against her chest, her face exhausted and beautiful and so full of fierce love it hurt to look at. Daniel had taken that photo with shaking hands. His own heart so full he'd thought it might burst. I kept peace for too long, he said to the photograph, his voice barely above a whisper. I let her get away with the comments, the looks, the little digs. I thought if I just ignored it, if I just kept this away from her, it would be enough. Mara's smile didn't change. Of course, it didn't. Not anymore, Daniel said. And the words felt like an oath. She went after our daughter. That's the line. He turned away from the photograph and moved to the pantry, reaching to the back of the top shelf where Lena couldn't see. His hands found the wooden box smooth and familiar. Mara had made it for him years ago, one of her first successful projects after he taught her basic woodworking. The joints were a little rough, the finish uneven, but she'd carved their initials into the lid with painstaking care. Daniel carried the box to the table and sat down heavily. His hands hovered over it for a long moment before he opened it. Inside, photographs from when they first met, ticket stubs from bad movies, the hospital bracelet from when Lena was born. A folded ultrasound printout. The image grainy and mysterious. Tiny Lena, just a smudge of potential. Letters Mara had written him when he traveled for carpentry conferences. Silly, sweet letters full of terrible puns. And I miss US. And beneath it all, a sealed envelope, cream-colored paper, Mara's handwriting in blue ink. For Lena, if anything ever happens to me, Daniel had found this envelope 6 months after Mara died, tucked in her dresser drawer. He'd held it in shaking hands, considered opening it, decided against it. It was for Lena. Mara had wanted Lena to have it someday, but now he picked up the envelope, carefully, turned it over. No seal on the back, just a flap tucked in. He could open it. He could read what Mara had written. His fingers trembled against the paper. What did you know? He whispered to the empty kitchen. What were you trying to protect her from? The house settling groaned in response. Somewhere upstairs, Lena's floorboards creaked. She was walking around, not sleeping. Of course, not sleeping. Daniel stared at the envelope for a long time. Then with sudden clarity, he stood and grabbed his phone from the counter. His fingers moved with purpose, pulling up contacts, scrolling to Bryce's number. He typed quickly. We need to talk tomorrow morning. The fishing dock. 6 a.m. Come alone. He hit send before he could reconsider. The reply came 3 minutes later. I'll be there. Daniel set the phone down and looked again at the envelope. Not yet. He'd open it when the time was right. When he had all the pieces he needed, he returned the box to its hiding place, checked that the doors were locked, and climbed the stairs slowly. Outside Lena's door, he paused. No sound from within. He knocked softly. Lena, can I come in? A pause. Then, yeah. He opened the door carefully. Lena lay in bed, her blankets pulled up to her chin, her eyes red and swollen. The drawing of their family, the one she'd made years ago, with the three of them holding hands, sat on a nightstand, carefully preserved in a small frame. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed. Can't sleep. No. She picked at the edge of her blanket. Dad, what Nora said. Why would she say that if it wasn't true? Because some people use truth like a weapon, and they don't care if they have to make things up to do it. He smoothed her hair back gently. Nora found an old photograph. Your mom with her cousin from before we met. And instead of asking about it, she created a story in her head. A story that wasn't true, but fit what she wanted to believe. Why would she want to believe something mean? Because believing it meant she could hurt us. And hurting us made her feel powerful. Daniel took a breath. Some people are like that, sweetheart. They need someone else to be small so they can feel big. Lena was quiet for a moment. Do you have a photo? I do. Can I see it tomorrow? Of course. She nodded, then sat up suddenly and threw her arms around his neck. Daniel held her tight, his face buried in her hair that smelled like the lavender shampoo Mara used to use. I love you, Dad, Lena whispered. I love you, too, kiddo, more than anything. He stayed with her until she fell asleep, her hand clutching his, her breathing eventually deepening into something like peace. Only then did he extract himself carefully and close her door. In his own room, Daniel didn't bother with the lights. He lay on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Beside him, Mara's side of the bed stayed cold and empty. He rolled toward it, pressing his face into her pillow. It didn't smell like her anymore. He'd washed the sheets too many times. I know what I have to do, he told the empty pillow. I know what you'd want me to do. The house creaked. The wind rattled the windows and Daniel lay awake planning. The fishing dock sat at the edge of Pine Lake, weathered with stretching 20 feet into water that looked black in the pre-dawn light. Fog rolled across the surface in thick waves, muffling sound, turning the world into something surreal and half-formed. Daniel arrived at 5:45, parking his truck on the gravel lot. He brought 2 cups of coffee from the thermos he'd filled at home, steam rising into the cold October air. His breath came out in visible puffs. He walked to the end of the dock and sat, letting his legs dangle over the edge. The water lapped beneath him, patient and endless. Somewhere across the lake, a loon called, lonely and strange. Bryce arrived exactly at 6, his sedan crunching over the gravel. He climbed out slowly, his shoulders hunched like a man walking to his own execution. When he reached the dock, Daniel handed him one of the coffee cups without a word. Thanks, Bryce mumbled, sitting beside him. They stayed silent for a moment, 2 men drinking coffee while fog turned them into ghosts. Finally, Bryce spoke. Daniel, you know Nora didn't mean. Tell me why she said that. The word came out flat, not a question, but a command. Bryce flinched. He stared into his coffee like it might offer him an escape. There was a photograph. She found it in some old boxes when we were cleaning the attic last month. Mara was some guy. They looked close. Her cousin, Daniel said quietly. Thomas Reeves. He gave Mara a place to stay when her parents disowned her for dropping out of college. She lived with him for 8 months. I know I told her that, but Nora. Bryce's voice trailed off. But Nora what? She convinced herself otherwise. Bryce took a shaky breath. She said the timeline didn't make sense. Said Lena was born 9 months after that photo was taken. Said maybe you didn't know, but she did. Daniel's grip on his coffee cup tightened. The photo was from March. Lena was born in December. That's 9 months because that's when Mara and I conceived her in March. After that photo was taken, Thomas moved to Seattle for work and Mara moved in with me. I know that now. I looked it all up online, found Thomas's wedding announcement, found the dates. You shouldn't have had to look anything up, Daniel interrupted, his voice still quiet, but hard as iron. You should have told your wife she was wrong the second she said it. You should have protected Lena from that poison. Bryce's face crumpled. I tried. God, Daniel, I tried, but when Nora gets something in her head, she doesn't let go. She was obsessed. Spent weeks building up this whole story. She'd come to bed and just talk about it. How Mara had lied. How you didn't know how someone needed to tell the truth. The truth? Daniel laughed. A sound with no humor in it. She doesn't care about truth. She never has. No. Bryce agreed miserably. She cares about winning. They sat in silence. The fog was starting to lift, revealing the far shore in patches. Pine trees dark against the brightening sky. She tried to destroy my marriage. Daniel said suddenly. Years ago before Lena was born. Did you know that Bryce went very still? What? She spread rumors that I was cheating. Told Mara's parents I was controlling, abusive, all kinds of lies. She tried to convince Mara to leave me. Daniel's jaw clenched. Mara didn't believe her, but it caused problems. Real problems. We almost didn't make it through that year. I didn't know. Bryce whispered. She never. She said Mara was the problem. That Mara had cut her off for no reason. That you'd turn Mara against her own family. Of course she did. Daniel finished his coffee and set the empty cup beside him. Nora rewrites history to make herself the victim. She's been doing it for so long, she probably believes her own stories. Bryce's hands shook on his cup. What are you going to do? Daniel turned to look at him fully for the first time. Bryce looked older in the growing light, graying at the temples, lines around his eyes, a man hollowed out by years of living with someone who drained him dry. I'm going to protect my daughter, Daniel said simply. Whatever that takes, Daniel, please. Nora made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but she's still family. No. The word came out sharp. She stopped being family the moment she looked at my daughter and tried to destroy her. There's no coming back from that. Bryce's face crumpled further. So what? We just never see each other again. Ruby and Lena never get to be cousins. Ruby can see Lena anytime she wants as long as Nora is not there. Daniel stood, his knees cracking in the cold. But Nora, she's done. Finished. I'm making sure everyone knows exactly who she is and what she's capable of. Ow. Daniel smiled then, a smile that held no warmth. The Caton family gathering. 3 days from now. Bryce's eyes widened. You can't, Daniel. That's 50 people. That's perfect. Daniel picked up both coffee cups. Tell Nora I'll be there. Tell her to look forward to it. He walked back toward his truck, leaving Bryce sitting alone on the dock. A man caught between two impossible choices. The drive home took 20 minutes. The sun was rising properly now, turning the fog gold and pink. Normally, Daniel would have found it beautiful. Mara had loved October mornings, the way the light slanted through the pine trees. Today, he barely noticed. At home, Lena sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas eating cereal. She looked up when he came in, her eyes still shadowed with yesterday's hurt. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head. "Sleep okay?" "Not really." She pushed her cereal around. "I kept having bad dreams." Daniel sat across from her, guilt settling heavy in his chest. "I'm sorry, kiddo. It's not your fault." She met his eyes. "You said I could see the photo today. The one of Mom, right?" Daniel stood again, moving to the drawer where he kept important documents. He pulled out the photograph. Mara at 19, laughing, standing next to Thomas, who had his arm around her shoulders in a clearly platonic familiar way. On the back, Mara had written with Tommy. "He made me dinner after I bombed my interview. Best cousin ever." He handed it to Lena. She studied it carefully. Her small face serious. "She looks happy." She was. Thomas was good to her when her parents weren't. He's really her cousin. Really and truly. He got married 5 years ago. Moved to Seattle. We sent him a wedding gift. A set of handmade cutting boards I made in the workshop. Lena traced her finger over Mara's face in the photo. Aunt Nora she just saw this and made up a story. "Yes, that's crazy." "It is." Daniel agreed and cruel. Lena set the photo down carefully. "What are we going to do?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lena twisted her hair tie. "Are we just going to pretend it didn't happen? Are we going to see them again at Thanksgiving and Christmas and act like everything's normal?" Daniel looked at his daughter, his brilliant, perceptive daughter who saw too much and felt too deeply. "No," he said quietly. "We're not going to pretend." "Good." Lena's voice was fierce, almost angry. "I don't want to pretend. I don't want to have to smile at someone who hurt us." "You won't have to." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "I promise you that." Later that morning, after Lena went upstairs to get dressed, Daniel returned to the kitchen and stood there thinking. The Catan gathering was in 3 days. Every October, Bryce's extended family descended on the lakeside picnic area for a day of grilling and games and performative happiness. Daniel and Mara had gone every year, suffering through Nora's pointed comments and subtle digs because Mara believed in family, in trying, in giving people chances. But Mara was gone, and chances had run out. Daniel opened the wooden box again and took out the sealed envelope. He held it up to the light, could just barely make out the dark lines of handwriting through the paper. His hand shook slightly. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's see what you wanted her to know." He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding 3 pages of lined paper covered in Mara's familiar handwriting, slightly messy, letters leaning right, some words scratched out and rewritten. "My darling Lena," the letter began. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard and kept reading. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope you're old enough to understand this. I hope your dad is there with you because he loves you more than anything in this world and you should never doubt that. I'm writing this while you sleep in your crib. You're 3 months old and already you're the most perfect thing I've ever seen. You have your dad's eyes and my stubborn chin and you cry like you mean it. Loud and honest and fierce. There are things I need you to know just in case. Things about family, about truth, about who to trust. First, your father is Daniel Harlow. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. We made you together out of love so big it scared us sometimes. I met him when I was 19. Lost and angry and sure the world would chew me up. He was teaching carpentry at the community center and I signed up because I needed something to do with my hands. He was patient and kind and he saw me. Really saw me when most people just look past. We fell in love slowly then all at once. Like a building that takes months to frame but then suddenly has walls and windows and becomes a home. But there are people who don't want us to be happy. People who need others to fail so they can feel successful. And the worst of these people is my sister Nora. Daniel's breath caught. He kept reading. Nora has always hated me. I don't know why. Maybe because our parents love me more. Maybe because I left home and she stayed. Maybe because I have what she wants. A partner who actually loves me. A child born from that love. A life that's messy and real instead of perfect and hollow. When I was pregnant with you, Nora tried to convince me to leave your father. She said terrible things. That he was using me, that he'd leave, that I should get out before I got hurt. When I didn't listen, she went to my parents, told them Daniel was abusive, controlling, dangerous. My parents believed her. They stopped speaking to me. I forgave them eventually. I forgave Nora because family is supposed to forgive, right? That's what I was taught. But I was wrong. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some people take your forgiveness as permission to hurt you again. If I'm gone and you're reading this, it means your dad has had to deal with Nora without me there to run interference. And I'm so sorry for that, baby. I'm sorry you'll have to navigate her poison. I'm sorry your dad has to fight those battles alone. But he will fight them. I know he will because he loves you completely and he won't let anyone hurt you if he can stop it. So here's what I need you to know. Stay away from Nora. She'll try to get close to you after I'm gone. She'll act kind, act concerned, act like she cares. Don't believe it. She doesn't care about you. She cares about control. And if she tries to tell you that your dad isn't your real father, if she tries to plant that particular poison, know that she's lying. I don't know why she'd do that, but I know her and I know she's capable of it. She's capable of anything if it means winning some imaginary game. You are Daniel Harlow's daughter. You are mine. You are ours. Don't let anyone take that away from you. I love you forever and always. Mom. P.S. I've recorded a voicemail on my phone for your dad. I update it every few months. It says some of the same stuff just in case I never get to tell him in person. He has the SD card in his desk drawer, the one from my old phone. If you need proof of anything I've said here, that's proof. My voice, my words, my truth. Daniel read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. The third time he read it out loud because somehow hearing Mara's words in his own voice made them more real, more present. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood moved to his desk in the corner of the living room and opened the bottom drawer. There, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a SD card from Mara's old phone. He'd saved it after she died, unable to throw away anything that held her voice, her words, her digital fingerprints. He picked up the SD card and held it in his palm. So small, so powerful. Thank you, he whispered to the empty room. Thank you for this. That afternoon, he drove to the electronics store in town and bought an SD card reader, then spent an hour at the library, transferring files to his laptop. He found a voicemail file easily. Mara had labeled it for Daniel. Important. He plugged in his headphones, click play, and close his eyes. Mara's voice filled his ears, alive and warm and absolutely her. Hi, sweetheart. If you're listening to this, I'm not there. God, I hope you never have to listen to this. But if you are, I need you to hear some things. First, I love you. I have always loved you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me besides Lena. Second, protect our daughter from Nora. I mean it, Daniel. Don't let her get close. Don't let her play the concerned aunt. She tried to destroy our marriage and if I'm gone, she'll try to destroy you through Lena. Please, please keep her away. Third, Lena is yours. Completely, totally, undeniably yours. If anyone ever questions that, there's a letter in my dresser drawer that explains everything. I wrote it for Lena, but you can read it if you need to. And if anyone ever tries to hurt our daughter, burn it all down, Daniel. I know you're gentle. I know you try to keep peace, but sometimes peace isn't possible. Sometimes the only option is to fight. So fight. Fight for her. Fight for us. I love you both so much. Take care of each other. And Daniel, don't let my sister win. Whatever game she's playing, whatever move she makes, don't let her win. The voicemail ended. Daniel sat in the library, tears running down his face, people walking past without noticing or politely pretending not to. I won't, he whispered. I promise I won't let her win. That evening, Lena asked to go to bed early. The day had exhausted her. Grief did that. Daniel knew it drained you from the inside out. He tucked her in, read her 2 chapters from the book they were working through, and kissed her forehead. Dad, she said as he reached the door. Yeah, kiddo. Thank you for believing me. He turned back confused. What do you mean? I mean, even when Aunt Nora said those things, you believed me that I'm yours. You didn't even question it. Her voice was small. Some kids at school, their parents, when bad things happen, sometimes they don't believe them, but you did. Daniel's heart broke and reformed in the same moment. He crossed back to her bed and knelt beside it, taking her small hand in both of his. Lena, I will always believe you, he said fiercely. Always. If someone hurts you, if something happens, if you need me, I will believe you and I will fix it. That's not just my promise as your father. That's my promise as a person who loves you more than my own life. Lena squeezed his hands. Mom will be proud of you. The words hit him like a punch. He couldn't speak for a moment. Couldn't breathe. Finally, he managed. Yeah, baby. I hope so. After she fell asleep, Daniel went downstairs to his workshop in the basement. The space smelled of sawdust and oil, familiar and comforting. Tools hung on pegboard walls, organized with the precision of someone who spent decades teaching others to respect their equipment. He cleared his main workbench and laid out what he had. Mara's letter photocopied 3 times. Printouts of the voicemail files, metadata showing it had been recorded 2 years ago, months before Mara died. The photograph of Mara and Thomas with the back clearly visible showing her handwriting. Records he'd pulled from their old emails, messages between Mara and her parents, showing the timeline of Nora's interference, the lies she'd told, the damage she'd caused. And then the hardest part, Daniel opened his email and sent a message to 3 people who'd known Mara well. Her college roommate, her old co-worker from the coffee shop, and Thomas himself. He explained what Nora had done, what she'd said to Lena. He asked if they'd be willing to provide written statements about Nora's past behavior, her pattern of lies, her campaign against his marriage. All 3 responded within an hour. I'll do it, Thomas wrote. Nora tried to get me to lie to Mara about you. Said you were cheating. Said I should convince Mara to leave. You refused and she tried to turn Mara against me, too. I've waited years to see her face consequences. Daniel organized everything into a folder, physical and digital copies, documentation, evidence, truth. Then he made one final addition, the invitation to the Catan family gathering with the date, time, and location highlighted. 3 days. In 3 days, everyone would know exactly who Nora Catan really was. Daniel turned off the workshop light and climbed the stairs. In the darkness, he let himself feel the weight of what he was about to do. Public humiliation, family destruction, the kind of confrontation that would ripple for years. But when he thought of Lena's face at that dinner table, of her tears in the truck, of her whispering, "Am I yours?" When he thought of that, the weight lifted. This was a revenge. This was protection. This was making sure Nora never got the chance to hurt his daughter again. I'm ready, he told the dark house. Let's finish this. The morning of the Catan family gathering dawned clear and cool, the October sun filtering through clouds that looked like torn cotton. Daniel woke before his alarm, his body humming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He barely slept, his mind running through the plan again and again, checking for flaws, for weaknesses, for places where Nora could slip through and turn the tables. He found none. Lena appeared in his doorway at 7 o'clock, already dressed in jeans and her favorite purple sweater. The one Mara had bought her last Christmas she'd been alive. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, hovering at the threshold like she wasn't sure she was allowed in. Me neither. Daniel sat up, rubbing his face. Come here. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. Outside the window, birds called to each other, oblivious to human drama. Are you sure about this? Lena asked quietly, going to the gathering after everything. I'm sure, but won't it be? Won't Aunt Nora be mad? Daniel looked at his daughter. This child who'd lost her mother too young and now had to navigate a world that kept trying to tell her she wasn't enough, wasn't wanted, wasn't really part of her own family. Probably, he said honestly. But Lena, some fights are worth having and protecting you. That's always worth it. She nodded slowly, then surprised him by leaning against his shoulder. I'm scared. I know, but I'm angry. Is that bad? No. Daniel wrapped an arm around her. It's not bad to be angry when someone hurts you. The question is what you do with that anger. What are you doing with yours? Making sure it never happens again. They sat like that for a while. Father and daughter watching the sun rise higher, strengthening their resolve. At 11 o'clock, they loaded into the truck. Daniel brought a backpack containing the folder of documents, his laptop with a voicemail file queued up and a letter from Mara sealed in a protective plastic sleeve. Everything organized, everything ready. The drive to Pine Lake Park took 30 minutes. Cars already lined the gravel parking lot. Sedans and SUVs and pickup trucks. The whole extended Catan clan gathered for their annual tradition. Through the trees, Daniel could see smoke rising from grills. Hear the distant laughter of children, his stomach tightened. You okay? Lena asked from the passenger seat. Getting there, he parked at the far end of the lot, giving himself an exit path if needed. Remember what we talked about? You stay close to Ruby or to me. If anything gets too intense, we leave. Okay. They climbed out. The October air smelled of charcoal smoke and fallen leaves. Someone had set up tables near the picnic shelter covered in red checkered tablecloths. A boom box played country music slightly too loud. Kids ran around with water balloons left over from summer, their laughter high and chaotic. Daniel spotted Bryce first, standing near one of the grills with a spatula in hand and misery written across his face. When Bryce saw them, he went pale. Then Nora appeared from behind the shelter, carrying a bowl of potato salad. She wore white pants and a navy blazer, overdressed for a picnic. But that was Nora. Always performing, always on stage. When she saw Daniel and Lena, her step faltered just for a moment. Surprise crossed her face. Then her chin lifted and that familiar cold smile settled into place. She sat down the potato salad and walked toward them, her heels clicking on the concrete pathway. Several people noticed, conversation dying in ripples. Daniel, she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. And little Lena, you really came after all that brave. Daniel felt Lena tense beside him. He rested a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. I came to give you exactly what you deserve, he said calmly. Nora's smirk faltered. Something uncertain flickered in her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. Daniel turned to address the gathering crowd. Could everyone come over here for a minute? I have something to share. Daniel. Bryce started forward, panic in his voice. It's okay, Bryce. Daniel's voice stayed level. This needs to happen. People drifted over, curious and confused. Aunts and uncles, cousins, friends of the family. Ruby appeared from somewhere, standing apart from her mother, her face unreadable. Within 2 minutes, 50 people had formed a loose semicircle around the picnic shelter. Nora stood at the center, her smile now frozen and brittle. Daniel, if you're here to cause a scene, I'm here to tell the truth, he interrupted. Something you should have done 3 days ago instead of lying to my daughter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nora's face flushed red. I didn't lie. You told Lena I wasn't her father. Daniel's voice carried across the gathering clear and hard. You looked at a 10-year-old child who lost her mother 2 years ago and told her she wasn't part of this family. You did that in front of witnesses. You did that knowing it was a lie. It's not a lie. Nora snapped, her voice rising. I found proof. You found a photograph. Daniel reached into his backpack and pulled out the picture. Holding it up so everyone could see this photograph of my late wife with her cousin Thomas Reeves. The same Thomas who gave her a place to stay when she had nowhere to go. The same Thomas who attended our wedding. The same Thomas who sent us a Christmas card every year. He flipped the photo around showing Mara's handwriting on the back with Tommy. Best cousin ever. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Nora's mouth opened and closed. That doesn't prove. It proves you never bothered to ask. Daniel said quietly. You saw what you wanted to see because it fit the story you wanted to tell. A story where you got to hurt us. We got to play God with a child's sense of identity and belonging. Someone in the crowd. Daniel thought it might have been Bryce's sister said softly. Oh, Nora, what did you do? Nora's hands clenched at her sides. This is ridiculous. I don't have to stand here. You're right, Daniel interrupted. You don't have to stand here. But since you're not leaving, let me share something else. He pulled out the envelope containing Mara's letter, still sealed in its plastic sleeve. The sight of it seemed to drain the blood from Nora's face. This, Daniel said, is a letter my wife wrote to Lena. She wrote it when Lena was 3 months old, just in case something ever happened to her. I found it after Mara died, but I never opened it. It was meant for Lena. He carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the pages. But after what you said the other night, I read it and I think everyone here needs to hear what Mara had to say about you. No. Nora's voice cracked. Daniel, please. He began reading. The crowd listened in absolute silence as Mara's words filled the air. Her love for Lena, her warnings about Nora, the story of how Nora had tried to destroy their marriage, had lied to Mara's parents, had spread poison wherever she could reach. When Daniel reached the part where Mara wrote, some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some people take your forgiveness as permission to hurt you again. Someone in the crowd made a small sound of distress. He finished reading and folded the letter carefully. That was written 2 years before my wife died. She knew. She knew Nora would try something like this. Nora stood frozen. Her face streaked with tears she probably didn't know were falling. That's not she was lying. Why would she lie? Daniel asked simply. What would she gain from writing a private letter to our daughter? A letter she hoped would never be needed and filling it with lies about you. Nora had no answer. But wait, Daniel said, pulling out his laptop. There's more. He opened the computer, pulled up the audio file, and turned the volume high. Mara's voice poured out clear and strong and absolutely real. Protect our daughter from Nora. I mean it, Daniel. Don't let her get close. Don't let her play the concerned aunt. She tried to destroy our marriage, and if I'm gone, she'll try to destroy you through Lena. The recording played to the end. When it finished, the silence was deafening. Ruby broke it. Mom. Her voice was small, broken. Is that true? Nora turned to her daughter, mouth opening, but no words came out. Is it true? Ruby's voice climbed higher, tears streaming down her face. Did you really do all that, Ruby? I can explain. Ow. Ruby's voice cracked. How do you explain trying to destroy someone's marriage? How do you explain hurting Lo? Daniel pulled out the final folder. I also have written statements from 3 people who witnessed Nora's behavior over the years. Her attempts to manipulate, to lie, to control. They're all here dated and signed. He held up a folder, but didn't open it. Didn't need to. The weight of evidence was crushing enough. Bryce pushed through the crowd, his face ashen. He stopped in front of his wife, staring at her like he'd never seen her before. How much of our life has been a lie? He whispered. Nora reached for him. Bryce, please. He stepped back away from her touch. How much, Nora? She had no answer. Or perhaps the answer was all of it. And she knew better than say it out loud. Daniel looked at the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as he could. I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone. I'm sharing it because my daughter deserves to grow up without someone actively trying to destroy her sense of self. She deserves to know she's loved. She's wanted. She belongs. He put his hand on Lena's shoulder. And anyone who tries to take that from her will have to go through me. Lena looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. But there was something else there, too. Relief, vindication, maybe even pride. Nora made a sound, then something between a sob and a scream. You've destroyed me, she whispered. You've destroyed everything. No, Daniel said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. Nora looked around at the crowd, at the family and friends who were now staring at her with mixtures of shock, disappointment, and disgust. Her carefully constructed image, her reputation, her power, all of it crumbling in real time. She tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't work. She tried to walk away with dignity, but her legs shook so badly she stumbled. Bryce didn't help her. Nobody did. She made it to her car alone, fumbled with her keys, and finally got the door open. The engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as she peeled out of the parking lot, driving too fast, leaving skid marks on the path. The silence she left behind felt heavy and strange. Then Ruby collapsed, sitting hard on the ground, her hands covering her face. Daniel moved before he could think, kneeling beside her. I'm so sorry, Ruby sobbed. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have stopped her. Hey, Daniel put a gentle hand on her shoulder. This isn't your fault. You're 13 years old. You're her daughter. You shouldn't have to manage your mother's behavior. But Lena. Ruby looked up, her face red and stray with tears. Lena, I'm sorry. Lena came over and sat beside her cousin. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around Ruby and they cried together, 2 girls caught in adult warfare, trying to find their way through the wreckage. Bryce stood apart, staring at the place where Nora's car had disappeared. After a long moment, he turned to Daniel. Thank you, he said hoarsely. Daniel frowned. For what? For showing me the truth. Bryce's laugh sounded broken. I've spent 15 years making excuses for her. Convincing myself that her cruelty was just stress or misunderstanding or my fault. Somehow you freed me. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He settled for a nod. People began drifting away from the shelter, returning to grills and games. But the energy had shifted. Conversations were quieter, more serious. Several people approached Daniel to offer quiet words of support, to tell him they'd always suspected Nora was trouble, to say they were glad he'd stood up for his daughter. Daniel accepted their words with grace, but inside he felt hollowed out. Vindication didn't feel as satisfying as he'd hoped. It just felt necessary. An hour later, as the gathering wounded down, Ruby approached Daniel and Lena where they sat at a picnic table. Can I still see Lena sometimes?" she asked hesitantly. "I know my mom. I know what she did. But I miss having a cousin. I miss having family that's not," she gestured helplessly. "Of course," Daniel said immediately. "You're always welcome at our house. Anytime." Relief flooded Ruby's face. "Thank you," she sat down with them. And for a while, the three of them just existed in the October afternoon, letting the chaos settle around them like dust after an explosion. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Daniel and Lena said their goodbyes and walked back to the truck. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked as he started the engine. Lena was quiet for a long time. "Tired," she finally said, and sad, but also she struggled for the word. "Lighter, like something heavy has been lifted off." "Yeah." Daniel pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the lake behind. "I know what you mean." They drove in comfortable silence, the radio playing softly. As they turned onto their road, Lena spoke again. "Dad." "Yeah, kiddo. Mom will be proud of you." Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard, keeping his eyes on the road. "Yeah," he managed. "I hope so." That night, after Lo went to bed, Daniel sat on the dock behind their house, his feet dangling over the edge. The water was calm, reflecting a sky full of stars. The October cold had deepened, promising an early winter. He thought about Mara, about the life they'd built together, the daughter they'd created, the love that had carried them through every storm until cancer had taken her away. He thought about Nora driving away in humiliation. Her power finally broken. Part of him felt satisfaction. Part of him just felt tired. The dock creaked behind him. Daniel turned to find Lena padding barefoot across the wood wrapped in her comforter. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not yet." She sat beside him, pulling the comforter around both of them. "I keep thinking about today." "Me, too." They sat in silence, watching the stars reflect on the water. "Dad." Lena's voice was soft. "Thank you for believing in me always, kiddo. Always. And thank you for fighting, for not letting her win." Daniel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "That's what parents do. We fight for our kids. We protect them from people who want to hurt them, even when those people are family. Especially when they're family," Lena added quietly. And Daniel realized his daughter understood more than he'd given her credit for. They stayed on the dock until the cold drove them inside. In the kitchen, Daniel made hot chocolate, the good kind, with real cocoa and vanilla and tiny marshmallows that Lena insisted made official. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd read Mara's letter, where he'd planned his response, where he decided that peace wasn't possible when it meant sacrificing his daughter's well-being. "I have something for you," Daniel said suddenly. He retrieved the drawing, the one Lena had made at age 4. With the three of them holding hands from his wallet where he'd been carrying it, Lena took it carefully. "You kept this." "I've been carrying it since the night at Norris. It reminded me what I was fighting for." He reached across and tapped the stick figures. "This is us. This is our family. Nobody gets to erase us." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Nobody gets to erase us," she repeated. The clock on the wall read midnight. They should have been sleeping. Tomorrow was a school day. But tonight, those rules felt less important than this moment. Father and daughter, survivors of grief and cruelty, finding their way to something like peace. I miss Mom, Lena said suddenly. I miss her so much sometimes it feels like I can't breathe. Me too. Daniel's voice cracked. Every single day, but I'm glad I have you. She looked up at him, her face serious. Even when everything's terrible, I'm glad I have you. Daniel couldn't speak. He just pulled her into a hug, holding tight while she cried into his shoulder. He cried, too, finally letting go of the anger and fear and determination that had carried him through the past 3 days. When the tears finally stopped, they pulled apart, both laughing a little at their red faces and running noses. We're a mess, Lena said. Yeah. Daniel grabbed tissues, handed her half. But we're our mess. They cleaned up the hot chocolate mugs together, moving through the familiar routine of rinsing and loading the dishwasher. Small ordinary tasks that felt like rebuilding normally. At Lena's door, Daniel kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams, kiddo. You too, Dad. She hesitated. Are you going to be okay? The question caught him off guard. I think so. Eventually. Good. She hugged him one more time. Because I need you. I need you, too. He whispered into her hair after her door closed. Daniel stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to her move around her room. The familiar sounds of nighttime routine. Then he went to his own room and lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. A text for Bryce. Nora checked into a hotel. I don't know what happens next, but thank you for today, for everything. Daniel typed back, take care of Ruby. She needs you now more than ever. I will. And Daniel, I'm sorry for all of it. I should have stopped her years ago. Daniel stared at the message for a long time before responding. The past is done. Focus on the future. He set the phone on the nightstand and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally arrived, he dreamed of Mara. She stood at the edge of the lake, wearing the sundress she'd loved, the blue one with white flowers. The wind lifted her dark hair, and she was smiling. That smile he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. You did good, she said, her voice clear as day. I tried, Daniel heard himself say. I tried to do what you would have wanted. You did exactly what I wanted. She took a step closer. You protected our daughter. You fought for her. You made sure she knows she's loved and wanted in ours. I miss you, he whispered. I know. I miss you, too. Both of you. Her smile turned sad. But you're not alone, Daniel. You have her. She has you. And that's enough. It's more than enough, is it? The question came out broken. It is. Mara reached out and for a moment, just a moment, he felt her hand on his cheek, warm and real. Take care of her, girl, and take care of yourself. You deserve happiness, Daniel. Don't forget that. I'll try. Good. She began to fade, the lake and the trees showing through her like she was made of mist. I love you always. I love you, too. She disappeared and the dream shifted into something else, something formless and peaceful. Daniel woke as the sun rose, streaming through his window in bands of gold. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to peace. He went downstairs and started coffee, then pulled out eggs and bread for French toast, Lena's favorite. While the pan heated, he looked out the kitchen window at the lake, at the trees turning gold and red with autumn, at the world continuing its endless cycle of death and rebirth. The stairs creaked. Lena appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her hair sticking up in several directions. Morning, she mumbled. Morning, sweetheart. Hungry, starving. They made breakfast together, working in comfortable synchrony. Lena set the table while Daniel cooked. They ate slowly, talking about nothing important, school, the books they were reading, whether they should rake leave today or wait until the weekend. Normal, ordinary, beautiful. After breakfast, as Daniel loaded the dishwasher, Lena came up beside him and leaned against his arm. "Dad, yeah. Are we going to be okay?" He looked down at her, his daughter, his world, his reason for everything, and felt certainty settle in his chest like an anchor. "Yeah, kiddo," he said. "We're going to be okay." And standing there in their kitchen with morning light streaming through the windows and the sound of dishes clinking and the smell of coffee in the air, Daniel believed it. Not because forgiveness had been given. Not because family had been mended, but because justice had been done, truth had been told. And his daughter knew, really truly knew that she was loved, she was wanted, she belonged. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 months later, on a January morning, when snow covered the ground and ice edged the lake, Daniel received a letter in the mail. Return address, Nora Catan. He stood in the kitchen holding the envelope, debating whether to open it. Finally, curiosity won. Inside, 2 pages of handwriting, smaller than usual, less confident. "Daniel, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that I've been in therapy since October. Real therapy, not the kind where you complain about everyone else. The kind where you look at yourself and don't like what you see. My therapist says I have issues with control, with jealousy, with needing to be the center of attention. She says, I've been emotionally abusive to my family and destructive to anyone who threatened my sense of superiority. She's right. I spent years hating Mara because she had what I wanted, genuine love, real happiness. And when she died, instead of grief, I felt opportunity. A chance to finally matter more than her memory. That's sick. I know it's sick. What I did to Lena was unforgivable. I convinced myself I was revealing truth when really I was just hurting a child to make myself feel important. I can't take that back. I can't fix it. But I can promise I'll stay away from you, from Lena, from any situation where I might cause more damage. Bryce and I are divorcing. Ruby will stay with him, though. I hope someday she'll forgive me enough to have some kind of relationship. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. And I'm sorry, Nora. Daniel read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in the wooden box with Mara's letter and the photographs and all the other fragments of their life. Lena came downstairs ready for school. What's that? A letter from your aunt. He closed the box. An apology. Do you believe it? Daniel considered. I believe she's trying. Whether that's enough, he shrugged. I don't know. Maybe someday, but not today. Good. Lena said firmly. I'm not ready to forgive her either. And that's okay. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people. It's something you give when you're ready, if you're ever ready. They gathered her school things, backpack, lunchbox, the book report. She'd stayed up late finishing. At the door, Lena paused. Dad, can Ruby come over this weekend? She texted asking if we could do movie night. Of course. Thanks. Lena hugged him quickly, then headed for the bus stop at the end of the street. Daniel watched her go. This child who'd survived so much loss and hurt, but was still standing, still strong, still believing in the goodness of people even when they disappointed her. She was extraordinary, and she was his. Daniel closed the door and turned back to his quiet house. Soon he'd need to leave for work. He'd return to teaching carpentry at the community center, helping others find purpose in creation. But for now, he had a few minutes. He walked to the photograph on the wall. Mara holding newborn Lena. Both of them exhausted and perfect. We did it, he told the image. We protected her. She knows she's loved. She knows she belongs. The photograph didn't answer. It never would. But in his heart, Daniel heard Mara's voice from his dream. You did good. And in the January morning light, surrounded by the life they'd built together and the daughter they created out of love so big it still sustained him. In that moment, Daniel felt peace. Not because the past was fixed, not because everyone was redeemed, but because he'd fought for what mattered. He'd protected his child. He'd made sure truth won out over lies. And that was